you have to connect with two things, right? You have to connect with a bigger vision of something. Are you truly living your full potential doing whatever it is you're doing? That's one. So that's a vision of a bigger, better life. Are you spending, do you have the freedom to spend the time with your family? Can you do
Jens, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Michael. I'm excited to see you again, my friend.
Now, you are a very established W-2 guy, as most people are on this journey. But so let's rewind the clock a little bit. I'm curious to see what was your occupation, and then more importantly, what happened to you? What you developed some kind of discontent where you started looking at real estate, and I'm curious to know, kind of find what were you doing, and then what got you into thinking real estate in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I came from Denmark 27 years ago, I think it is now. So, we have that that European background to share. And, I did what I thought I was supposed to do, right? Got a education, got a W-2 job, worked for 25 plus years in IT. I loved the job. It was great. But my challenge was I didn't have any meaningful impact on my income, right? So in my mid 40s, I started to develop a little bit of a discontent in the sense like, man, do I want to do this for another 20 years? Do I want to work for somebody for another 20 years? And I couldn't really see what direction to go in. Everything looked like a job. And that's when I stumbled on the idea of investing in real estate. It's like, oh man, here's the avenue where you can, disconnect your time from your income. And it started out kind of, I was like, that's what I need to do because I was tired of having to keep up with the IT world and learning something new and all these young people, that were just so much quicker at learning stuff. So it was really challenging for me. And that's kind of when I was like, oh man, real estate, just the light bulb kind of went off about 8-9 years ago that I had to change.
How'd you get the light bulb? Did it have anything to do with the Purple Book, or did you get it some other way?
I wish I'd read the Purple Book earlier. It was actually it was one of the books that I picked up on Bigger Pocket. I think like How to Invest in Rental Real Estate by Brandon Turner or something like that. That was the light bulb that went off there.
And so how did you then execute on that plan, right? Because this is the problem. You read these books, and for me, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he used confusing terms like real estate investing and cash flow business. So I was like, well, I'll flip houses. That sounds good to me, right? Now, what did you in your Danish mind, you translated that, and then what did you do from after reading that book?
Yeah, so I'm very actional. I like to take action, right? And I'm kind of take logical steps towards something. So I was like, okay, what does this look like, right? Luckily, the books, and I started, listening to podcasts and everything else. Like, what are the logical steps here? I wanted to know the recipe, right? That's kind of how I was thinking. And the recipe was like 1 to 4 units, right? You can get a 30-year mortgage on there. You can qualify through your, with your own credit. We had some money saved up. It's like, oh, I can do this by myself with my dear wife. It seemed simple. It seemed approachable. And I was like, who do I know, right? So I started talking to people in my sphere. I was like, who invests in real estate? And I ran into a few different people, but everybody was kind of like doing smaller stuff. I was like, okay, I guess you do smaller stuff. So I started there, and luckily I got introduced to I guess he's a broker, right? And he's also, it's like, oh, I'd like to help new investors to buy smaller properties. Like, okay, let's do it, right? So for 1 minute or a couple of weeks, I looked at single family homes, and where I lived, it didn't make sense. I was like, wow, if I have to invest, a few hours from where I live, I knew that it didn't make sense to buy a single family house. I knew I didn't want to flip because I didn't have time, right? So it did make sense to do small multifamily early on.
And so you said small multifamily. And did you self-fund these things? You just kind of bought these smaller things yourself? Did you manage them yourself? Talk a little bit how you got into your first small multis.
Yeah, I mean, me and my wife, we had $200,000 saved up in a non-retirement account. That was all sitting in, stock market ETF. So it's 200K. I was like, we're willing to invest this. That's not nothing, right? When it came down to it, I probably wasn't willing to put it all into a few deals, but that was the start, right? And I I decided to, a couple of things that I really, in retrospect, did well. I decided to invest out of state. I was living in southwestern Colorado. Albuquerque, New Mexico was the biggest city that made sense. It's 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours away. So I knew I couldn't self-manage. I knew it had professional management in it. That probably saved me from not trying to self-manage, because that so many people get stuck in that, right? They're owner operators and they get stuck in the management and never can scale, right? So at least I got that going for me. So self-funded, I think the first deal was $117,000 for 4 units. So you can imagine the quality of that, right? But it was still, two fourplexes within, I think, 2 or 3 months, about 8 years ago. So it was short. I took action once I knew what I was doing, right? Or what I wanted to do.
Well, we're going to talk about scaling, but before we get into scaling, because that's what we want to know is how do we scale? Where are you today? Number of units, that kind of stuff.
Um, over 2,000 units under ownership. I think we've done 35 deals. We have 40,000 square feet of warehousing space too. We got some Airbnb stuff. So, in 8 years, right? That's kind of what it has gone from zero to that.
Yeah, it's amazing. The one thing I love about this business, many things, but one is your ability to scale this business in a short period of time. It's really amazing because of these professional management. It's very exciting and maybe even stressful when you close a deal. And then once you put the manager in place, you're like, oh, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, let's do it again. So you keep layering one over another. And that's really amazing. I mean, if I were to do it with companies, like I know people roll out companies, rolling up companies is really stressful. It can take like a couple years to stabilize the management team and then pull out. With this business, if you have a good property manager, you can do it in a very short period of time. So I love the scaling part of this, and there's a lot of people watching and listening to this. We're like, my gosh, I really want to scale my single family house portfolio, my multiple. How do I do it? Now I want to kind of couch this interview under what we call the 4 pillars of apartment investing success, because there's some things that we have to really pay attention to when we're scaling versus in a single family house world where it's maybe not as important, not as important at all. And there's really 4 of them. And one of them is being deal ready, building your team before you launch out and start calling brokers. There's some things you got to do. Number 2 is you got to get good at analyzing deals. Number 3, you got to get good at getting deal flow. And number 4 is you got to get good at raising capital. So those are typically the things that everybody wants to know about. So we're going to hit those the 4 pillars. So let's talk about deal ready. And you have now the benefit of hindsight, right? If you're just starting out, you might be stammering around and, kind of experimenting and doing it yourself and trying to figure out what works. But now in hindsight, especially when you're trying to, did your multis, but especially when you're trying to scale, how would you advise people to get ready, right? Because in the single family house world, I'd be like, well, I'm gonna call a broker. I'm gonna call them off the MLS and I'm gonna go visit the house and I'm gonna make an offer. Like that's my readiness, right? It's like
Is that the voice that you come up with too?
I guess.
Is that how you approach them with a southern accent?
That's just how I speak sometimes. I moved to Georgia a little while ago, and I guess this is my southern accent. It's awful, but that's those things like in a single family house world. I feel like it was like shoot, fire, aim kind of thing, and and it works pretty good, most of the time. But in hindsight, it didn't really serve me that well in multifamily, and I think as a result, I lost a lot of time. I made a lot of mistakes, and so maybe with like I said, bit of hindsight, what do you advise someone to get deal ready? Maybe even before you call that first broker, what are some of the things that are important?
Yeah, I think, first of all, of course, syndicating and going in with partners, it's a great avenue. But are you ready? Are you ready and willing to take on partners? Maybe and maybe not, right? So what does the first deal look like? Is it your own capital or is it with partners or investors or whatever? And you have to not just, oh, I can go and bigger. Are you actually ready to take on that responsibility that is to raise money and be part of that? I think that's one thing to look at, right? And some people say, oh, you should scale immediately. Maybe not, right? If I look back, would I have done it differently? With what I knew then, no, because I didn't know anything else, right? So I would probably spend a little bit more time getting educated, right? What are the right markets you want to invest in, right? What are the economic drivers? What's the what is the local government, what does it look like from a tax and insurance standpoint? What is the growth? All these different things. Make sure you buy in the right market. Make sure you buy in the right neighborhoods. Because as you know, right, this cheap stuff, the Class D stuff looks very appealing on paper, but in reality, it's very different, right? Um, Make sure that you know that underwriting process. You don't need to become an expert in underwriting, but at least have the fundamentals in underwriting. And I do see a lot of people get stuck there because they're engineers, they're IT people, and they're like, oh, I can underwrite my way to success. No, you can't, right? I mean, you have a great model that I use all the time, but don't like let that hinder you from making progress, right? I think just going out there and start networking and finding people that can help you, that maybe, maybe partners, it may be brokers, it may be other investors, but get as much education you can, both from courses and mentors and in the local market. I really love, and I run a meetup here. I love meetups and so forth because people will share. I'm very surprised about how open this community is. So people will share and so forth, right? So there is that initial phase of education and networking and getting kind of ready, right? Look at your own resources, look at other people's resources. Who do you need on your team? So I think, that's kind of some of the things I think of when you say that.
Well, let's talk about a team for a second, because I was just going to say, you mentioned it by the by, but let's shine a light on it, because again, in the single family house world, the team was much less important. And the reason is because you don't really need, years of a track record buying rentals. Like, a broker will take you seriously buying your first rental, well, because, well, you live in a house, typically you've bought a house. And so people go, okay, it's not a big deal. But you call a broker. This is what happened to me. I flipped like 20 houses at their 30 houses. I call a broker and they're like, yeah, Michael, well, how many apartment buildings have you done? And I'm like, well, none, but look at all the houses I flipped. Because, yeah, wow, how about this? You send me your proof of funds and I'll send you a deal. I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? Look at, and he got no credit for that. And I found now that, it doesn't really matter what your tracker is, really the team behind you. Let's talk about the team and, who should you have in a team? Who are some of the more important members of that team? And then how do you leverage that to overcome your lack of experience?
Yeah, it's funny. I was so confused about the idea of teams. What did the team mean back in the day? I couldn't really figure it out, right? And I realized there's two, later on, there's two pieces, two kind of broad categories you need on your team, right? There's your internal team, if you will, right? So those are your partners, potentially, right? If you need a partner, let's say you are very good at underwriting, but you hate calling brokers. So maybe you need somebody in your team to be that extroverted individual to go and call brokers. So, maybe you need somebody that's good at bringing capital. So that's what I call my internal team, right? Those core partners that is going to be the ownership group of it. Yeah, if it's a single family house, a duplex, a quad, that's maybe just one person yourself, right? Maybe it's just one, or maybe it's your rich uncle who is willing to put up the money. Or if you go to syndicate, 200 units, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10 people, right? But that's your internal team. And then of course the second part of it then is the external team, right? So that would be your broker, that would be your insurance agent, it would be your loan broker or your mortgage broker, it would be property management, it would be your general contractor for the rehab, all these different things, right? That's much more complicated because when do you build that team? Do you build it before you get a deal? Do you build as part in the middle as you are moving towards closing and afterwards, right? There's definitely some people like the broker, and how do you persuade a broker to take you seriously? The proof of fund, right? Yeah, then that's always a challenge. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem there. So on your first larger deal, you may have to find a partner that has done this a few times before and say, hey, yeah, I have not bought a 50 unit, but we have because my partner Joe has done a deal before, right? Or, you have a mentor or a coach or somebody else you can have that's on your team. I think that's really the only way you overcome that. Once they start asking for proof of funds, you've kind of lost them in the little ways because they don't trust you at that point, right? So we can definitely dig into some of these teams and how you build more of those.
Now, do you think that it's market dependent as to how easy it is to be able to get a broker to buy into, your story and award you a deal?
I think it's more timing specific. I mean, right now when we're speaking here in the middle of 2024, the brokers are not nearly as busy as they were 2 years ago. So they're probably more likely to take your call. Of course, it's also much harder to close a deal right now, given, the interest rates
Like
and so
getting
forth.
in. My point with that question was, yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. But getting in right now, if you're listening and you're thinking about, oh, I don't know how to piece these things together, get a broker take me seriously. They're not doing many closing dinners right now. So
Yeah.
so get out, you can get out in front of it and make a lot of headway now. And then when things get better, you're already positioned properly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think showing up, right?
let's talk about that, Jens. Yeah, let's talk this because the third pillar is deal flow, and we talk about getting deals from brokers, and how do you do that? How do you build trust, right? Because in the single family house world, you just get on the MLS and you submit an offer, right? And so that doesn't really work. You can't really go to, well, you can, but you really get deal flow through brokers. And then what Garrett was saying is, how do you break in? How do you get them to take you seriously? And I think that's definitely one thing. You talked about having a partner, having a team behind you to leverage that. But really, you really want to do is you want to get the off-market deals. You want to get that broker to share deals with you that no one else sees, or maybe a very small number of people. And I mean, I'll ask both of you guys, and Jens, you go first. And what can you do to accelerate that process so it doesn't take years, but maybe just weeks? What can you do when you're dealing with new brokers or you're getting into a new market? What do you do to kind of accelerate that process?
Well, deals are made by, I think, in today's world of internet and Zoom and everything else, I think you build trust by showing up, right? You travel to the market and you call up the broker and say, I'm going to be there next week to look at some deals. I would love to, take you for lunch or coffee or whatever it is. I mean, literally, and this is 8, 9 years ago. The first broker I met, he's the only broker I've ever used in this market in Albuquerque. He's a partner with me on a couple of deals as well. And I took the opportunity to drive, 4 hours to meet with him and get to know him. And every time I was there, I would meet. So you build the trust. I think one way you build trust is by showing up, right? Showing your face, showing up, and just be honest and vulnerable about what it is you want to achieve. And then of course, right, you're serious when they send you some deals, you underwrite them, you give them feedback and say, well, yes, this, I love the deal, but this is what works for me and what doesn't work and so forth. So I think, hey, they are also human beings that want to have a connection with you. And I think as long as you reciprocal in that relationship, that'll go a long way, right? Don't be like the guy who calls once, every 6 months. Hey, do you have a deal for me? That doesn't work, right?
That's a good
Yeah,
point. Garrett,
I think
anything you'd add to that?
yeah, I think in the beginning it's more difficult if you're trying to do this from scratch and you have to put in more of an effort. Spending money, if you even if it feels uncomfortable to buy them a meal, to buy them, take them out, buy them a drink, offer to pay for everything, offer to uh get in front of them, like Jen said. I mean, I think that's a really good way to speed up that process. But then I would say I have brokers that send me off market deals often that I've never met. And that's also a real thing. And that's just about the relationship that you build and your ability to act quickly. If all you did was get them feedback and you did it in 24 hours, you stand apart from the rest of the group that's out there that are just tire kickers. And so even just doing something simple like that, and then having ongoing conversations, quick ones, longer ones, like all that, just layer it in. When it gets time to where you actually are able to land a deal and perform on it, and this is huge. So you're kind of like, there's two phases. There's prior to you doing a deal in the market, and then post you doing the deal. The prior to the deal, you got to try really hard, do all these things I'm talking about. After you get a deal, execute on it better than you've ever executed on anything before. Don't be a pain to work with. Be really easy. And then broadcast that success when you close the deal everywhere. Call the other brokers. Hey, did you hear about this deal I just closed? And that way everybody's going to hear about it. So it's going to just have these ripple effects. Pretty soon you're going to get to our level where in our markets, we're seeing deals first. We're the only ones that see it. and no one else even sees it until we've passed on it.
Yeah,
No, I love that.
yeah, absolutely. And that's key, right? Getting to that point. Now, you both of you kind of glossed over something, and that's the second pillar, deal analysis. Because Gary, you're right. You really want to be responsive to a broker, because most people are not. They don't even respond to the broker. So the question is deal analysis. Jens, you mentioned something earlier that a lot of people are stuck with it. Let's talk about analysis a little bit, and some of the challenges in analysis, and why are some people stuck with that. And the problem, of course, with being stuck is if you can't analyze deals, well, you can't make offers, right? So you're not going to get a deal done. But some people are stuck in this, and some people are stuck who are not numbers people, but some people are stuck even they are numbers people. What are some of your mistakes you're seeing in the analysis phase, and maybe how can one overcome that?
You can ask how many mistakes we have made. But I think the problem is there, right? You have a spreadsheet and you can plug in numbers. Everybody or anybody can do that. The biggest challenge is how do you actually translate the numbers that you plug into real understanding of the market, right? Like, what is my rent growth going to be? What is my expenses going to be? What is insurance going to change? All these different things that you and I have seen happen to us, right? Some we planned for, some we didn't. And people just don't know. There's like, I've talked to so many people, it's like, if you buy this deal, make sure you figure out what your taxes are going to be, right? You say you can increase rent by X number of percent. Think about that. How many people are you going to lose through that process? So people just get stuck in that, well, they don't really know what the right answers are, right? So they either just plug in the broker's numbers, they come up with something that, seems reasonable to them, but they don't really know. And they're so uncertain in the quality of their underwriting, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge is, I mean, we've been wrong every single time, either for, we've been wrong on the good side, things went better, or we've been wrong on the bad side, things went worse, right? And just people get stuck in that. And it's really hard challenge to overcome. I think, experience in the market, talking to brokers, talking to property managers, you cannot solve that by looking at a spreadsheet. It's really about connecting with the people in that market to understand what are the right numbers to plug in here, right? That's the only way I've found to overcome this challenge.
I see so many people that when they're first starting out, they never really graduate past that initial training in whatever way that they got it in underwriting. And that is, I think, what hinders them the most from actually doing deals often. And it's just because if you think about it, if you're good at underwriting or if you're not good at underwriting and you go up against somebody that's excellent at it, they're going to be able to see with X-ray vision into these OMs differently than the person that doesn't know what they're looking at. And there's somewhere in the middle that you want to try to ramp up to get to that excellent level, I think, as soon as possible, so that you can start to have that same X-ray vision. And a deal is a deal to you versus not if you can't find it. And so you could change one number in your underwriting and it could throw the whole deal off, and it's not a deal to you and you missed it. And I've had that happen.
Yeah.
I've had it happen where I trusted someone to do my underwriting for me, and I blew off a terrible deal, a deal I thought was terrible. And then I went in and looked at it. I'm like, you completely messed these certain things up in here. I tweaked it, and all of a sudden I'm bidding on the deal. Then we win it. So it can change. And think about the impact of that. Just one number on a spreadsheet can cost you don't know what you're doing when you get to that level. And it's so I think this is when anyone asks me that's brand new, where should I start to look? What should I start to do? Because there's so many things to think about. Where do I start? I think that's the perfect place to start is your deal analysis, your deal analysis, and your underwriting. That is where you're going to make your money in the beginning and always.
And this is really where this team comes into place. We talked about earlier about your team, about, this is how you leverage their track record when talking to brokers and investors. But this is where the team comes in place, specifically property managers and lenders, right? Because like you said, Jens, how do you know what the rent growth should be, right? I can go on Rentometer and do online analysis and rules of thumbs, but at the end of the day, I'm just making stuff up. So really leveraging your team at this point, so you're not making numbers up, you're actually leveraging the people in the market, your property manager, your lenders, getting down your underwriting. And number two, this is very, very important, is having some kind of experienced person look over your shoulder. because confidence is a major problem. Like, I'm putting all these numbers in there and I'm biting my nails. Should I make an offer on this? Like, what if it gets accepted and I screwed it up? I'm going to overpay. Why am I winning this deal? I'm obviously, clearly, since I'm winning a deal, I must be overpaying. Therefore, I'm making a mistake. So having some experienced person looking over all this stuff is key. And then, Garrett, what you said about uncovering things that maybe only you know, that comes with experience, because you particularly, you're digging around in a deal and you're like, well, if I can do this thing, like if I can do this one thing and generate $25 a month in rent, because a comp does that, and I only know that because I drove to it, $25 a unit is massive, right? Now you can actually pay asking price or maybe even above it, and everybody's laughing at you because you're overpaying, and you're laughing because you took the time to really sharpen your pencil. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, if you're getting to a place where you're bidding on a deal and you're so far below what other people are getting to, you probably screwed something up in your underwriting. That's just there's something, and I've scratched my head. I'm like, why am I coming up, 3 million short on this deal compared to where everyone else is? And I had to dig and figure out, what did we miss? What did we miss? And sure enough, there were some things in there that maybe I didn't get all the way up to 3 million, but I got a lot closer, and it just made a lot of sense. The other thing is, think about this: in any corporate environment related to real estate, the lowest person on the totem pole is the underwriter, right? Like the analyst. That's the lowest, that's the very first entry level job that you can get in real estate, is an analyst. Okay. By the way, there's a ton of those out there that would love to make a couple extra bucks. Reach out to one of them, have them teach you the ropes, hire them. They're making, maybe 60K a year doing what they're doing, maybe more than that. I don't even know what they're doing, but that's a really way to hack your way into getting there faster.
Let's talk about raising capital, which is the last pillar, is deal capital. I think a lot of people, that's their biggest fear. When I talk to people, they can sort of wrap their head around analysis and maybe talk to a broker, deal analysis, a deal finder. Okay, I get my dad, but raising capital, right? First of all, I've never done it. I'm afraid. I don't want to lose people's money. I don't want to beg my friends and family for money. I don't want to manipulate people. Well, because I can't. I'm not that good. What's your advice for helping people overcome this, I would say, limiting belief mindset block? Help them get over that block in raising capital.
Yeah. So first of all, we're never asking any people for money, right? We're giving them an opportunity they otherwise would not have. So, I think that's the first thing we have to think about, that when we're in the business, it's like, oh, real estate investing, this is what we do. We think everybody has access to it, but very few people have access to it. So suddenly we're giving people an opportunity they otherwise would not have access to. So I think we just have to think about that first. And then I think we just have to be genuine and say, I do this with my own money because I believe in it. And then we can, start sharing the things that we love, investing in Main Street instead of Wall Street, the tax benefits, the ability to actually invest in a physical asset versus stocks and stuff like that. Also, even just the access to the people on the team, right? If you invest in Apple, good luck trying to get hold of the CEO, right? In a real estate deal, you can call up Michael Blank and ask him questions about what's happening there, right? So I think there's that. And then just that, every time we go and think about rejection, what does rejection mean? Rejection means that we have created an image in our head about a certain outcome. So Michael, if I come to you and say, hey, please invest 100K in my deal, and you say no, if I have set up this expectation that Michael was going to invest, he says no, oh my God, I've lost something. Well, you haven't really lost anything that you didn't already have, right? So I think I always, when people ask me this question, I say, make sure you have a long list of people, make sure you prepared them in advance about what real estate investing is. So you're not coming to them the day you need the money, and you have a long list and you just start saying, hey, Michael, are you interested? And, hey, Garrett, are you interested? Hey, Sue and Joe and Paul or whatever. So you have a long list and you prepared them and you just start offering them that opportunity. And then you put your team behind it too and say, well, I'm partnering with so-and-so who, done 50 deals or whatever. So there's a team, there's the fact that you have prepared them in advance, right? You talk a lot about the sample deal packet. That's a great way for people to kind of prepare, right? So I think do the homework before you need the money. Make sure you have a long list of people. Make sure they already know what this is all about. And then just start generally having those conversations with them about what it means to invest in real estate, right? Disclose the risks and everything else, but also giving them an opportunity that they otherwise would not have.
You keep talking about opportunity, and I agree with you. I think thinking of it less of raising capital, because when you say you're raising capital, you're tying yourself to an outcome. Therefore, when someone says no, it's like, oh, you got a rejection. But instead, what you're doing is providing people an opportunity. You're actually serving them by educating them and presenting an opportunity, right? Because the average investor has got their money in the stocks and 401k, ETFs, right? Most of them have never invested in an alternative investment like real estate. Maybe someone has a real estate investment, but you're right. This opportunity is you're giving someone access to a large building that they couldn't otherwise afford to buy. You're giving him ownership in that building, and you're giving him access to, tax benefits they couldn't otherwise get, for cash flow they couldn't otherwise get. And so to me, I always look at it and sharing my enthusiasm with other people and educating them. And if there's an investor who's got money to invest and you tell them about something that cash flows, that gives you tax benefits, I mean, I would be interested in that. You're like, wait, is that legal? Like, can you really do that? I didn't know you could do that. Like, can you tell me more? And now they're asking you. You don't even have to manipulate them or sell them on something. You simply share your enthusiasm. And then I kind of pivot a little bit, Jens. I would say, I don't ask them directly. I said, do you know someone that might be interested in a conversation? Because everybody knows at least somebody. My boss, my brother, my blah, 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 right? And so now you're less likely to get a no. And then Garrett, you tell me about your career at Cutco. What they do, they teach you always to get referrals. In fact, they teach you to get 10 referrals with every person you show knives to. And people are like, oh my gosh, but 10? Like, I don't even know 10, but can I give you 5?
It's the only way that you advance or continue the business. Once you run out of friends and family, you have to continue.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't do that with their recommendations with their investors. And it's the same thing. I mean, you can get referrals from those people that invest with you for sure, the family, friends, all that stuff. And I think that's an area you don't see a ton of people focusing on. That when we start focusing on it, we'd all of a sudden be multiplying our investor base, because you're just asking for the order on that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to, if I can be reflecting back on the first deal, what I actually had some partners in, the conversation wasn't very hard because we had shared interests. We were all cyclists at that time. And I started to talk to them about, I said, hey, you know me as an IT guy. Did you also know I've been investing in real estate? And I had done, a few deals on my own, and said, we have this new one coming up. So I was able to persuade them in a couple of ways. One was, hey, I'm putting my own money in it. I've done it in a little while, and I have a partner that has done this for 25 years, right? So there's a few different things that helped them persuade. And I just, it was actually we still have this deal, the first one we did in 2018, we still have it. And my partner, met him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, this is the best deal I've ever invested in. So he's super happy and so forth, right? But just, you start having those kinds of referrals to you, or those kinds of testimonials, that helps a lot as well, right?
So as we kind of close the episode, I know you're a certified high performance coach. You actually have an interest in coaching mindset issues. You're basically a shrink, okay? You're like a shrink. All right. But I want to boil it down for you, because you see a lot of people, and I see a lot of people, they want financial freedom. They want to have certain intentions, but they never do anything. It's like super frustrating. Or they don't follow through. Maybe they start and have a fit and spurt, and they go hard and heavy. They're really excited for 6 weeks, and it kind of peters out. Like what issue, like if you were to boil it down, like what is that one thing that in their mind blocks these people from, either starting or sticking with it? And kind of what, if you could sit them down for a cup of coffee, how would you help and advise them?
Yeah, it's not important enough for them. I think it seems, it would be great to get the financial freedom and the income and all these different things, but it's not important enough. The necessity is not there. Most of them, have a decent job and they do all those things. So it's like, oh, this is nice, but it's not important enough. It's not like the bridge, what do you call it? The boat's on fire and stuff like that. Like, this would be nice. No, nice doesn't cut it. It has to be the most important thing, right? And that's the thing, the biggest challenge.
So interesting. Okay, let's talk about it. Is there a strategy for a person like that? So you're sitting down with someone, oh yes, I want to do these things. I want to scale my blah, blah, I want to quit. I want to exit. But they're, making $250,000 a year and they have a pretty nice job and nice family and nice house, and they're telling you these things. And you're like, I don't know. Like, is there something they can do, or are they kind of screwed? Like, if you're a high income earner and you have a pretty good life, are you screwed? Or is there something, like, could you work with them to get them to a point where all of a sudden the current trajectory of their not so bad life is actually sounds unacceptable to them in some way?
Yeah, it's a couple of ways, right? You have to connect. You have to connect with two things, right? You have to connect with a bigger vision of something. Are you truly living your full potential doing whatever it is you're doing? That's one. So that's a vision of a bigger, better life. Are you do you have the freedom to spend the time with your family? Can you do the things that are important to you? So that's kind of that elevating that vision for them. And then you have to connect it with the pain as well, right? Oh, so you make 250 a year, but you work 70 hours a week. You're unhealthy. You don't see your kids. You can't travel. All these other sacrifices that they're making. So connected with the vision of a better life and bring the pain into the picture, right? So if the pain is strong enough and the vision is strong enough, then the impetus to start making changes is there, right? I mean, literally the way I mean, get this, right? 2020, start of COVID, I'm still working. I promised my wife that we were going to two things. I was going to quit my job and we were going to move from Colorado back to New Mexico because she has family here. And I was the scared guy that was sitting in a corner saying, oh, I can't quit my job now. God knows what's going to happen. Nobody's going to pay rent, blah, 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 right? That was the fear. And the thing that pulled me out of it, which actually I quit my job there in the middle of 2020. I moved, which most people were just not doing anything. You just basically say, what promises have I made? What is my potential? Who do I need to really help here, right? What promises do I need to keep, especially to my wife and stuff like that, right? So it is able to make these, you are able to make these changes, but you have to connect to the right reason behind it and the right vision and pain.
That's good stuff, Jens. Jens, how can people connect with you?
I am very old school, so they can go on my website, opendoors with an S, capital.com. They can send me an email. It's Jens, Jens, at opendoors with an S, capital.com. Not to be confused with another one that has a similar name, Yeah, I'd love to connect with people. Anybody's free to send me an email and connect.
It's awesome, man. Thanks for being on the show today, sharing so much experience around deals, and then the mindset stuff at the end was awesome. So thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure.